Thank you for joining us, Jordan. How are you today?
I'm pretty well. How are you doing?
Great. I love the view here. So we have the still right behind you, which is pretty special to be not only have you live, but then to go live and then have the other star of the show right over your shoulder there.
Actually, yeah, and we're actually the production schedule worked out. We're actually distilling right at this moment, so I hope you can hear me over the kind of the din of the still.
No, we can for sure. I could hear a bit of a whistle there, a bit of that simmer, but no, it's perfect. It sets the vibe nicely.
Perfect. I'm glad.
So before we get started, I was just mentioning to everybody that this is a weekly conversation that we do, Touton Live, every Thursday, 1 p.m. And it's been a great way for us to really engage with our top producers and brands, and really just to go behind the label and learn more about it and what makes it special, what makes it unique. And we're going to dive into that in a moment. And I was just mentioning that it's extra special because you're our first distiller that we've spoken to on this conversation. We've been doing these for 6-7 months, so it's overdue. So again, thank you for joining us.
All right, well, so just don't let me ruin this for all future distillers. I'm sure they're very good at what they do.
So we're going to give everybody just another minute to join. So what's happening right now? You said you've already started distilling, so it's obviously been a busy day. What's your day already entailed?
Yeah, so we get up pretty early and get into the distillery. There could be a bunch of different things happening on any particular day. Right now, Jaron, the head of our tasting room, is working on some new extractions for some to-go cocktails up here. In the back, my team is busy labeling and bottling hand sanitizer, actually, for a local school.
Oh, cool.
And I got in early to transfer, our macerated gin into the still, and to get the heat on. So we've been going here for about 5-6 hours so far today, and
Whoa.
it's we're rocking and rolling. Always multiple things happening here.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. With a small operation, I guess it's all things all the time.
It's many hats and many processes simultaneously. Yeah, otherwise it doesn't work. So
exactly. So let's officially kick it off. So thank you everybody for joining us today. We're joined live today with Jordan Milne. He is the founder and distiller at Hardshore Distilling Co in Portland, Maine. So to give everybody an idea of where Portland is, most people I'm sure are familiar with Maine on our northeast coast, but Portland is down to the south there. So south of Augusta, south of Freeport, and it's really a it's a booming area for distilling, but originally for craft breweries. So I'm going to turn it over to Jordan to give us a bit of his background and history, and to give us sort of an update of how really Hardshore came to be.
Sure. So like you said, yeah, Portland is absolutely a hotbed of beverage manufacturing. Some of the largest and most well-known craft brewers are here, including Shipyard, Allagash, Maine Beer Company. So there's a real and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's something like 186 breweries here in Maine.
Wow.
So it really is a deep rooted brewing community, and from that sprung, like in so many places, the nascent distilling community. So taking it a step back, I'm not from Maine originally. I'm from upstate New York. I grew up in Bouckville, New York, which is kind of in the Syracuse area. Think Erie Canal, all that kind of stuff. Okay. I grew up on a farm and wound my way through and ended up in New York City working in finance. And it was a great career decision for me. I learned a lot. It was a great professional development, career. But it became obvious, I think, after 4 or 5 years into it, that that's not what I wanted my life work to be. I didn't have a better idea necessarily, but I knew that probably wasn't going to be what I was going to spend my life doing. So during that, I had gotten really into bourbon. I started collecting bourbons and doing bourbon tastings with my friends and visiting craft distilleries. And it wasn't really until I met my now wife, then girlfriend, and was introduced to her father that I started really getting into gin. He was a Scotch and gin guy, and I was a bourbon guy. And so I started getting him into bourbon. I tried getting into Scotch. Love Scotch. I can absolutely appreciate it from a technical perspective. It's just not my cup of tea. So he started getting me into gin, and then I had purchased a small still from a website from a small maker in Kentucky, and started tinkering around making bourbons. And I decided to try my hand at making gin. I think really as a way to impress my girlfriend's dad. I think I just took it a little too far. So like all things, it started out pretty awful. It started to take shape, and then when my wife and I decided that we wanted to move out of New York, we'd been there for between 8 and 9 years, to move to a smaller map dot, raise a family. That's when I decided, you know what, this is the time. I like my hobby. I like this. There's a very strong tailwind behind me, industry-wise, with craft distilling blowing up everywhere. We decided on Portland, Maine for unrelated reasons to distilling, but this is a great town for it. So we said, all right, let's make the jump.
So that's super risky. I mean, it just takes so much, confidence and just drive to take a hobby. And we got to back up for a second, because this is a hobby you're doing in Manhattan, right? So I lived in Manhattan for 13 years. So how exactly do you distill in Manhattan?
It's not an easy hobby to do in Manhattan. So the still that I had is a little bit taller than me. It's about almost 7 feet tall. And I was really doing it like, I know it's a cliche. I hate the cliche. I was doing it in my bathtub, because otherwise it would have scorched the floor of our rental apartment in Manhattan. And there were a couple of close calls where we almost got caught. I don't know if caught is the right. I mean, caught probably is the right way to do it, because home distilling is not a legal practice, unlike home brewing. But yeah, it's a weird hobby to have in Manhattan. There's a couple of homebrew stores around New York. Some are pretty distant, so I would take a camping backpack into deep Brooklyn and grab 60, 70 pounds of corn and fill up that backpack and take the subway back. And I can tell people what is
good workout.
Doing? Yeah, no, it was a good workout. So yeah, it wasn't your typical Manhattan hobby, but it was a great one. And it kind of it bore what I was going to do with the rest of my life. So I think I'm really happy that I was able to kind of overcome that urban inertia to be able to do that hobby.
Exactly. So
it was great.
So it's your hobby. You wind up moving to Portland, Maine. Portland, Maine. So how do you go from that to a fully functioning distillery? So walk us through those steps. Did it take a few months, a few years?
A few years. Quite a few of them. So the first thing that you need to start a distillery is a license from the federal government. And there are a lot of things in your way when you're trying to get your federal license. The first is a space. It's space dependent. So our distillery is a bonded warehouse. So you have to start paying rent long before you have a product that you can market and start generating revenue. You have to start paying a commercial rent. It's about a year-long application process for your federal license.
Wow.
That's if you crush it. We did not crush it. We made lots of mistakes, which I'm sure is a similar story that a lot of distillers have. Yeah. And so then once you get your license, great. Now you can be a distiller. Now it's time to actually put the equipment together, figure out what your recipe is, how are you going to differentiate yourself in an ever-crowding market, what you're labeling, all the regulations that go along with that. I mean, it's a very, very rapid education into a pretty thick regulatory scheme. And then the state gets involved with their licensing, the city gets involved with their licensing. I mean, there's a lot of hoops.
Yeah.
But look, it's all doable. There's a lot of knowledge out there. There's a lot of wheels that have already been created, and if you want to create every wheel as you get going, it's gonna be tough. Luckily, the brewing industry, which I think is really I don't even want to say the big brother, but really the father of the craft distilling industry, has created this cultural currency of cooperation. And when you walk into a craft distillery as a wannabe, I guess, craft distiller, and you tell them, hey, I want to start a craft distillery too, it isn't just like, okay, yeah, good luck with that. I had to move heaven and earth to make this happen. It's really like, any questions? How can I help? And it's really this culture of get going, take the plunge, find your market, get it up on legs, and then turn around and help the next guy get up too. And without countless distillers and countless brewers who are there to answer pretty rudimentary questions that we had all along the way, there's no way Hardshore would ever have happened. So I'm very grateful, and I try my best that when inevitably we've had lots of people come in the door saying they want to start a craft distillery, we try to make time and answer questions as best we can.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, without that, it would have taken even longer. But from your recipe, because we're going to start talking about your recipe and what differentiates it. So from start to finish, how long did it take you to perfect or to craft this recipe that you're producing?
We've thought a lot about this. Like, you can't really go from the beginning of like me being a hobby distiller to include that in a recipe development. So I think that the timeline that we've settled on is probably the fairest timeline, is about 4 years.
Wow.
I mean, if you think about how long this takes, I mean, making a batch of a hobby-sized batch of gin takes about 2 weeks. I think we probably went through a good solid 300 batches, until we were down to like, okay, this I think is what we want our gin to more or less be like in hobby size. When I say hobby size, my still was 13 gallons. That's the size of the kettle on my hobby still. My new still, which you see behind me, is 300 gallons. Wow. So it's not just multiplied by 300 over 13. The new alcohol that was coming off of the new still, once we decided to scale up our recipe, was vastly different than the recipe that we had developed on our smaller still. And so it took an additional piece of time to kind of hammer our old recipe into a new recipe that could be translated to our larger still, our larger mash tank, our larger fermenters, all those problems. Just to give you an example of scaling problems, when you are distilling in 5-gallon buckets, fermenting in 5-gallon buckets, which is what we were doing on the hobby scale, one of the tricks to keep your fermentations going is to keep them warm. The ambient temperature can just cool those down, but the yeast just basically go dormant and fall asleep. At our scale, our biggest issue is heat. There's so much yeast inside of our fermentations that they'll actually cook themselves, and the fermentations will fail because it's too hot, and they'll begin to die off. Oh. So it's the exact same recipe from the mash standpoint, but the equipment and the problems that you face are exactly opposite at this scale than what we were facing at the hobby scale. So that's one minor example. Those problems surfaced, dozens and dozens of times at like every step along the way. So basically it's like, okay, great. You've created a gin that you think you like and people like, and that's what you want that to be a gin. Now go learn an entirely new way to make it, because your old system is not going to translate at all to your current system.
Yeah, it's complicated. So let's get into what makes your recipe unique. So tell us a bit. This isn't a London dry style. So
this is not the London dry style. Yeah. So for those listening, the London dry style has really become the dominant form of gin over the last few decades, sort of like the IPA in beer land.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I love an IPA, and I love a London dry gin. It's what got me into gin, right? It wasn't like I tasted gin and was like, oh, this is terrible. I got to fix this. I love those gins. It just didn't make sense for us to try to go and out Bombay. That's a losing formula from the get-go. Yeah. So we wanted to do something that we could show people, look, London dry style gins, juniper forward gins, those are really great. That's a really great way to make gin. That's one of what I think is an infinite number of great ways to make gin. We're going to do something different. And so we just had to go and figure out what that was. And so the obvious first step is flavor, right? Gin is sort of the original flavored vodka. So you take juniper, you macerate that in vodka, you run through a still to refine it, and you have juniper flavored vodka. That's sort of, or gin. That's sort of in the nutshell. There's a lot of other things you can add. The real rule is it needs to be predominantly flavored with juniper, which is a pretty subjective measure.
Yeah.
So we decided, okay, juniper is a pretty polarizing flavor. I love it. Lots of people love it. Lots of people don't. We talked to a lot of people about why gin wasn't really their bailiwick, and juniper was a common theme that we heard. Just like, man, that's just not my thing. So we decided to pull juniper back in our recipe quite a bit. But we needed to replace it with something. We wanted to replace it with something that was familiar, but relatively unconventional, that hadn't been done by a million people. So one of the big trends when we got to the scene was citrus. You see a lot of really citrus-dominant American gins, and that's their answer for replacing, kind of juniper as that sort of that lead singer in the band. We decided we didn't want to jump on the citrus train either, because there were so many craft distillers that were joining citrus. I love citrus. Would love to have citrus, but I wanted to be really unique. We really wanted to start from a place and add to the bar set, add to the shelf something that hadn't been done before. So after many of those test batches, like I told you, we really created this triad of flavors that we really loved. Obviously, juniper had to be in there in order for it to be gin. But we stumbled upon fresh rosemary and fresh mint. And so fresh rosemary and fresh mint are two flavors that people are familiar with, right? It's not a scary thing. It's not, what's that? It's used. They're used in a lot of cocktails. Think about, a gin and tonic with a rosemary sprig in it. I have a Negroni here with a rosemary sprig in it. I mean, it's a pretty classic complement to the way that gin was already being consumed, but it was in almost no gins at the time. So we fell in love with that fresh greenery of green mint and fresh rosemary. We only use fresh because we tried to use dried a couple of times, really, to save effort and money. Using fresh ingredients is a huge headache and expensive to store and maintain and to make sure that you get consistent product out of it. But we were not getting the brightness that we were able to get when we use fresh. So as a rule, we have stated early on, we will only use fresh rosemary and fresh mint in our process. So once we had those three flavors, we had a great triad that we liked, and we just kind of had to round in the edges to try to create a little bit of complexity. We didn't want to create complexity the more common way that people create complexity, which is just throw in as many botanicals as you can. There's, Monkey 47, a really great gin out there, has 47 botanicals. We didn't want to go that route. We wanted to create complexity within a relatively simple set of botanicals. So we have 5 botanicals. We have our fresh rosemary, our fresh mint, juniper, which we source exclusively from Tuscany, really because it's that bright blue, bold juniper. And then we round that out with orris root, which is the root of the iris flower, which is a really interesting botanical. It's floral on the nose, but on the palate, it's really earthy and minerally. So it's the root of the iris flower, not the petals. So you get this wonderful aroma, but on the palate, it's sort of a warming earthiness in the middle of the gin that really weights it down. It's really lovely. It's an interesting botanical to use. You need to be careful with it because it's kind of potent. And then coriander is the 5th botanical. Coriander is the seed of the cilantro plant. It has this really lovely fruitiness almost to it, but like a spicy edge to it, and it just rounds out our botanical mix really beautifully. So the overall recipe that we ended up with is this really nice green herbal upfront with this warming, earthiness in the background to it. It's a really, really nice complex gin that is made very simply, but with meticulous attention to detail. So the other way to differentiate ourselves in the gin market, besides flavor, which is the one that everyone thinks about, is the structure of the gin itself. So when you hear London dry style gins, what dry means is really there's very, very little sweetness. It's all been distilled out or fermented out of the distillate. We start our process with grain grown on my family farm exclusively, and we want to keep some of the character of that grain in our neutral spirit, the underlying, vodka that is the base of the gin. And so we end our fermentations just a little bit early. And what that does for us is it leaves some of the latent sugar from that fermentation left in the distillate, and it creates a heavier, rounder distillate. So it's not as thin. It allows the flavors that we've so carefully crafted to kind of linger longer and unfurl more slowly on the palate, and it just gives them more of an experience, more of a mouthfeel. And so our neutral, which is sort of the base of any gin, is about 2/3 of what we do. We could just buy that from a large commercial distiller and save a lot of time and frankly a lot of money. But it's so important that the structure of our gin, the weight of that neutral is so important to the character of Hardshore that we wouldn't dream of it. And it's very, very important that we make the neutral perfect, just the way that it needs to be for Hardshore gin.
And I think that's just worth repeating because almost everybody just buys a neutral and they don't really care about it. They just buy
when you look at the price, it's hard to argue, right? I mean,
Right.
it's so easy. I mean, half of the equipment that I have in this distillery I wouldn't need if I just bought the neutral.
Yeah.
But then I feel like I'd be going out to the market with a product that is far more similar to the other products that are on the market, so much less distinguished, or distinctive. And then also, it wouldn't be us. It wouldn't be Hardshore. The reason that I make gin is because I love making gin. I started this project as a distiller, not as a brand supplier. So our job, what we like doing every day is making gin. And to us, that starts with the water and the grain, not with the neutral. So we celebrate being distillers. We celebrate our mash process. That's very important to the DNA of Hardshore.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we're so proud to represent you. Is it's such an amazing craft product, and it's handmade, from start to finish, which is very rare, even in the craft industry. So, and I mentioned that word craft. So everybody likes to use the word craft, handmade, this, that. So you're an actual craft distiller. I mean, do you take exception to people using the term craft?
I absolutely don't, because everyone finds ways to add value along the chain. There are so many good products out there that start with a commercial neutral, and they found ways to do something that nobody else is doing, and it's a very high quality product. When you buy neutral from a larger distiller, you're not buying low quality neutral. You're just buying commoditized neutral. And so that means that you have to be extra creative on the back end in order to create a product that is distinctive against other products that are based on the exact same neutral. There are amazing products that do that. So I don't begrudge anyone calling themselves a craft distiller because they don't start with the grain the way that we do and end with the bottle. We do. That's the fun part for us. We love it. It helps distinguish us. It gives us another set of levers that we get to use to make Hardshore different and distinguished in the marketplace, to make Hardshore more Hardshore, not better. That is not how we distinguish what we do. We are not better than other gins out there. We are different, and we are the most Hardshore gin out there because we control the process from start to finish. Sometimes what I do begrudge is that, unfortunately, in the market there is some deception, where there are a lot of brands that like to elude that they're doing things that they're not doing. That I don't think is great. I think honesty is an important part of our marketplace, but I think the consumer has really kind of grown up along with craft distilling to understand that craft distilling is not craft distilling. There are people out there that are doing things the way that we're doing it. There are people out there that are saying that they're doing it, but they're not doing it. The information's there. Just be transparent. And I have no problem with anything.
I agree with that. And some people try to hide behind marketing. If you over-market it, maybe we can hide. And you can get away with that for a bit maybe. But, like you said, consumers are sharp. They're smart. There's a lot of selection out there. And, people are going to spend their dollars where the quality is. And
there have been some high-profile brand crashes when, a certain marketing story has been leaned on, and then it turns out to be not exactly the way that it was sold, and it all comes crashing down. So we want to make sure that we're building our brand on principles of transparency, on principles of using our hands to make small batch, small production, low yield gin that is one of a kind.
And in the background here, we have the picture of the shore and the water. So, much like Scotch, we were mentioning Scotch earlier. Scotch, every Scotch distiller is going to talk about their water source. So I know this is also, sort of a unique point for you, is your water source. Tell us a bit about that and why.
So water is the beginning of the process, and we use. The quality of your water is gonna dictate so many parts of the process from beginning to end. And so people ask us all the time, like, how do you treat your water? What do you do with your water? The answer is, at Hardshore, we do nothing to our water. It comes straight from Sebago Lake, which is about 17 miles north of Portland. It has about 2 trillion gallons of water in it. The average, it's estimated the water spends about 7 years in that lake from its source in the White Mountains down to where we are. It is the world's best water filter. The water that we get is extremely clean. It's extremely pure. It's absolutely low in organics. There's no iron. There's no chlorine. It's when you look at the ideal water profile for yeast health, for clean proofing of a spirit, it's pretty much right where what you're trying to make water be. If you're not starting with water of that quality. So because we get to start with that water quality, one of the things that we're really proud about is that we have a very low water use relative to other distillers, or to distilleries that aren't blessed with such natural gifts like Maine. That's, I think, why the brewing industry in Portland and the rest of Maine is so robust, is because our water quality is so high, and it just naturally flows from there, I guess, to use a terrible pun. But yeah, water quality is everything, and we're very fortunate to be near some of the world's best water.
Yeah, it's another distinguishing factor besides the recipe and the attention to detail is your natural water source, which is sustainable, and it's much better quality in the end than a lot of people are using. We're, as always happens, time running short.
Wow, that happened quick.
I know, it goes like that. So I want to switch gears for a second. Let's talk for a moment about an unusual topic, but relevant for today's times. Let's talk about hand sanitizer.
Okay.
How did this happen? Just give us a background of hand sanitizer, how it started, where you're at today with it, because I think it's an amazing story.
I think all of us are still sitting here, 8 months into this pandemic, wondering to ourselves, how did this happen?
Yeah.
So hand sanitizer was something that we had heard about and was starting to rumble up that there were some distilleries in Portland and around the country and in various other places around the country that were starting to produce hand sanitizer because of this shortage due to increased supply or increased demand because of the pandemic. Right. This is around the early March time, mid-March time frame. It was completely illegal to start making hand sanitizer at that time, which I don't begrudge anyone. There was a need, and I applaud those guys for saying, like, look, I get it. I'd love to follow the rules. I'm not going to put people's health at risk. That trumps, any particular regulation that's out there. But there's risk involved to a company that makes that choice. And so we were starting to get emails, just saying, hey, we heard about this. Are you guys going to make hand sanitizer? And some of the distillers got together and we started saying, man, what do we do here? Is this allowed? Hand sanitizer is regulated by the FDA as an over-the-counter drug. So the FDA gets involved. I mean, the TTB is definitely involved, which is the Treasury regulator around alcohol and taxation. So I mean, there were some regulations that had to be jumped through to make this happen. Eventually, we got a call from the University of Maine that was saying, hey, we're working with the hospital system in the state, and they're running out of hand sanitizer, and we're wondering if you guys can help us out. And we were just like, all right, I guess that answers it. It doesn't matter how illegal this is. Our hospitals, our frontline workers are basically going to run out of hand sanitizer, and we're doing this. So there was a very peculiar quirk of fate, I guess. St. Patrick's Day had just elapsed, and had come and gone, and it was more or less canceled. And so there were a lot of brewers around the state that were sitting on huge inventories of absolutely perfect, delicious, Maine-made craft beer. And we called them and said, hey, what are you guys going to do with that? And they're like, it's not going to sell. Without St. Patty's Day, I mean, we have way too much. We're like, great, don't dump it. Bring it to us. So we cobbled together a group of distillers where the beer was initially delivered to. They stripped the beer to 40%, 50% alcohol. Then it all was shipped to Hardshore, and we ran it up our vodka column and distilled it up to 96%, which is where you need it to be for hand sanitizer. We shipped that to the University of Maine. They formulated it into hand sanitizer and shipped it out to the hospitals. At the same time, we were starting to get a lot of calls from the community saying, hey, we need hand sanitizer also. And so we said, great, we can start formulating ourselves, and we started making it available. So it was an awesome project. It kept our company, our team working pretty much around the clock. It required quick thinking. It required enormous capital decisions that we had to make, on the fly. We needed to figure out bottling, packaging, labeling, regulatory compliance in the span of about 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
We had some great law firms. We had some great packaging consultants that jumped in, all on a pro bono basis, and we were able to get the product out, and we were able to supply the community with hand sanitizer in addition to our hospital. So it was not Hardshore only. There were about 18 different companies, breweries and distilleries and wineries that were involved, but it was the best thing that we were able to pull out of this pandemic. So we were very proud of the work we were able to do, and we actually took some of the proceeds from that process, and we were able to forward those along to organizations that are helping feed school-age children that are no longer going to school and rely on that channel for nutrition. So it's a process that has just been feeding on itself ever since. So it's good as begetting good here, and that's the part that I think I'm the proudest about.
No, it's very cool, and it's like you said, it's a way of giving back, but also supporting the community and supporting those in need. So it's a very cool story, and I love this picture because it's the bottling of the hand sanitizer, so it has to be done one by one on these little spigots, right?
So I don't think that's the way that Purell does it, but that's the only way that we could do it. So I want to give a shout out to my team, because we did not have the tools, we did not have the process, aced the way that we needed to really make this an efficient process, but they never questioned it. They said, okay, let's do it. And we worked literally around the clock to make sure that this product was bottled within compliance and was available for our community. And they never batted an eye. Yeah, it was stressful. Yes, we needed breaks. We made sure that we monitored our team. We were in constant contact, being like, hey, you know what? Don't come in tomorrow. You are at your edge. But they never wavered. It was an amazing effort to see everyone step up and just, that bottle filling machine, that's for 750s. That is not for 8-ounce, 4-ounce bottles of hand sanitizer, but they made it work. It was a miraculous effort. I'm so impressed and so grateful that they were able to make it happen.
It's super cool. And it's just worth noting that every bottle of hand sanitizer, but also every bottle of vodka, is hand bottled like that. So handmade. This is handmade. It's craft. So everyone is hand bottled. Small label, little machine. There's not a big label, labeling line.
Nope, there's not. This is how we do it. And it honestly, it really comes down to it gives us a jump on quality control. We watch our process, our product taking form from fermentation all the way through to packaging. And so we are able to spot things as they come up, and things come up all the time. So just watching the process very closely allows us to be really close to it and have great control over it.
No, and that's like you said, that's you have your hands in the game. You see everything as it goes. So it totally makes sense. So as we're running out of time, I just wanted to congratulate you for just really all the success you've had. But
hey, thanks.
USA Today listed here, best craft gin distillery in America. I mean, it's amazing for a new distillery to get these sorts of awards. It's really impressive.
Yeah, we love what we do, and when you love what you do, you dig in. You find ways to make it better every day. You find ways to make it distinctive. I mean, we love making gin, and that's the propulsion behind all of this that you see on the screen. I mean, we don't do it for awards. We do it because we really love doing it, and everything flows from there. So it's been an amazing experience. I have a great team. I get to come to work every day and do what I love. It's been an amazing journey so far.
Yeah, the passion shows and the quality is there, and just at Touton, it's such an honor to represent your brands on the East Coast and then work with our wholesale partners nationwide. So it's it's really an honor, and it just
We've been absolutely thrilled to work with the Touton team. I mean, you guys are such product experts, and people have really embraced. I mean, look, we're gin; they're used to wine, but people have really embraced us and have been asking questions, and they dig in, and it's been an incredible partnership. We've been really impressed with the intellectual curiosity, I guess, from the Touton team, which has really blown us away.
Well, no, you were really the first craft distiller who we started working with. You know, being a wine company for 40 years, we did some cognac, but as far as craft distilleries, you were really the beginning, and we've expanded that a bit since then. So
Yeah.
it's been great for us as well. So it's been a great partnership. So unfortunately, we didn't get to talk at all about the geekiness of distilling, which I would have loved to get into. We didn't get to talk about cocktails.
Well, we'll have to do this again sometime.
I know. We didn't get to talk about Negronis, both of our favorite cocktails, but you've got one there, and it makes.
I do have one here. So, yeah, if anyone has questions on cocktails and stuff like that, I'm very easy to reach. I love to geek out over cocktails. I love to geek out over distilling. Please get in touch with me. But yeah, just keep doing what you guys are doing, and please let me know if there's anything that I can do to help tell the story of Hardshore. I really appreciate the representation.
No, of course. Well, keep up the great work there. For now, I think we're going to have to sign off. But for everyone who's tuned in, thank you again for joining us. We'll see you again next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be going live with Escudo Rojo, our Chilean producer. So we'll be going live from Chile. So we'll see you then. And Jordan, thank you again. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of the week.
Be well. Thanks so much.
Cheers.